So till now we have seen various things like how to use various data types and all, and why Selenium is used and which all languages it supports, and why do we use C# language, right? So we started with the basics of C# and I told you some basic stuff. So now let's move forward to some of the advanced topics like loops, arrays, functions and all. And as we proceed with the course, we'll also discuss why we need to study all these topics while studying Selenium, and where all in Selenium will we be using all these topics. Right, so let's go to Visual Studio and I'll create a new project. I'll add a new console application project, say Oops Concepts. Okay, right, so this is your Oops Concepts project, and under this project I'll add a new class. That is, as we all know that this is the program.cs class file which contains the main method inside it, right? So I'll simply create one class known as concatenation operator. Alright, now out here inside this concatenation operator class, say suppose I initialize a string variable, say string x is equal to Selenium. And then similarly I have one more variable y is equal to say training. Okay, right, and then what I want to type Selenium training in one single line. So how will you do? You simply say console.writeLine x plus y. Now plus is a concatenation operator. This plus is the concatenation operator. We have seen in the previous class as well, where we were concatenating the strings and the various numbers, right? So this plus is a concatenation operator. Okay, and then similarly, say suppose if I have two integer numbers as well, say it is int a is equal to say 10, and then similarly int b is equal to say 20, right? And then when I say console.writeLine a plus b, and then when you execute your code, it simply adds the two numbers, that is a plus b 30, and in the first case it concatenates the two strings Selenium training in one single line, right? But if I write, if out here if I write console.writeLine a plus b plus x plus y, and if I write x plus y plus a plus b, and then if you run your code, so now if I execute my code, so here you see that we are getting two different outputs for the last two lines. The output is like quite different, right? The first line is we are printing a plus b plus x plus y. So what it does, it simply adds the two numbers, and then it concatenates it with x, the value of x, that is Selenium, and then concatenate it with the value of y, that is training, right? But in the next line when we are printing x plus y plus a plus b, the execution starts from the left hand side. It concatenates the two strings Selenium training, right? X and y are concatenated, then it is concatenated with the value of a, and then concatenated with the value of b, that is 20. So there is a potential difference between the last two lines. The output is quite different for the last two lines. Had I been written like this, say if I had been written x plus y plus a plus b in the brackets, and then now if I execute my code, so now you see that it prints the sum of the two numbers a plus b. Alright, so you might get error while working with Selenium as well, and you might get confused as well. So you have to be careful while using the concatenation operator. Concatenation operator, it never adds up directly, especially with the strings. Alright, so now let's move forward to the concept of loop. So till now everything that we have seen is there in every programming language, right? So now let's move forward to the concept of loops. So I'll add a new class into my project, and first of all let us discuss the while loop. So I'll add a new class, while loop. Okay, now inside the while loop I'll simply first of all add the main function to it. Okay, right, now in the while loop, how it is done? In the while loop, firstly we initialize the variable, that is int I is equal to 0. So first step is the initialization of the variable. Right, and after that we will write the while loop like this: while I is greater than, or you can say I is less than 10, console dot write line print the value of I, and I is equal to I plus 1. Alright, so what this while loop tells you, that is while I is less than 10. So this is a condition. What this condition tells, it tells that till the time the value of I is less than 10, keep on running, keep on going inside the while loop and keep on printing the value of I, and then increment the value of I by 1, that is I plus 1. Right, so when you execute your code, okay, so I'll simply write console.read key, and I'll also comment the main function of the concatenation operator class, since one single console application project cannot contain more than one main function. Okay, so I'll just comment the concatenation operator, the main function of the concatenation operator class, and then now if I execute my code, you see that it prints the number from 0 to 9. So while loop is something which will keep on running every time till the time the condition is satisfied. So I less than 0 is the I less than 10 is the condition that you specify in the while loop, and this is your incrementation or the decrementation part. Incrementation or the decrementation part, right? So while loop will keep on executing itself. Okay, and then we can even see the execution of the while loop by debugging the program. By debugging I mean running the code line by line as per the way you want it to run, or as per the way you want it to control, right? So debugging is very strong, it's very important while running your code. You need to learn it, because while running in while running your code in big Selenium scripts, you can get an error. So to resolve that error, we will need to debug the program. We'll need to see the execution of the program line by line, right? So when you want to run directly, you simply click on this start button and you will get your answer. But when you have to debug your code, what you do, you simply put a breakpoint, that is you simply click over here, right, and you simply put a breakpoint with a red dot, you see, right? So breakpoints are very powerful, like I have told you, like right now this is a small example, right? But when you will be running the big Selenium scripts, actually you get to know where exactly is this practical usage of the breakpoints. Okay, right, and then say suppose I put a breakpoint, and then now if I run my code, you see that the control has come to the breakpoint. Okay, and then you hit F11 from the keyboard. Okay, and then I hit F11. Alright, so initially the value of I is equal to 0. 0 is less than 10, condition is true, it goes inside the while loop, and then I say print the value of I, that is I is 0, and then after that I am incrementing the value of I by 1. I plus 1, that is 0 plus 1 will be equal to 1. So now you see that the value of I has been changed to 1. Right, so now it again will check the condition 1 less than 10 true. It will again go inside the while loop, print the value of I, that is 1, and then again will increment the value of 1, like will increment the value of I by 1, that is 1 plus 1 is equal to 2, and then now the value of I has been changed to 2. Alright, so again it will check the condition and it will keep on executing till the time the condition is satisfied. Alright, okay, so I'll just stop the execution and we get the result as well. Alright, like over here, and then over here you can even write I plus plus as well. It means the same thing, either I is equal to I plus 1 or I plus plus. This is the post increment. Okay, one and the same thing. And then you can also initialize the value of I to 10 as well, and then you keep the condition as while I is greater than 0, keep on executing the while loop, print the value of I, and I minus minus, decrement the value of I by 1. Okay, so now if you run your code, you will get the result in the reverse order. Okay, so this is how the while loop works. So now let's look at the for loop. But before actually moving towards the for loop, let us see the disadvantage of the while loop. The disadvantage of the while loop is that if you don't give the incrementation or the decrementation part, then you get stuck in an infinite loop. My loop will get stuck infinitely. That is, now if I execute my code, so now you see that it is running till the time you forcefully stop the execution command prompt. It will keep on running infinitely. So this is the disadvantage of the while loop. And then this disadvantage is overcome by the help of for loop. So let's see that. I'll add a new class, that is for loop, and I will first of all add a main function to it. Okay, I'll add a main function console.read key. Right, so now how do you declare the for loop? That is, we declare the for loop as for int I is equal to 0, I less than 10, I plus plus. So in the for loop, all the three declarations, all the three commands, all the three parts are being declared in one single line. That is, first comes your initialization, then the condition, and then the incrementation or the decrementation part. So all the three things comes into one single line. There is no chance of getting stuck in an infinite loop. Okay, right, and then now inside the for loop I can simply print the value of I. Okay, so now when you run your code, I'll run my for loop code and I run it. So you see that it prints the numbers from 0 to 9. So the basic motto of both the loops is same, but the syntax is only differing. For loop is more famous than the while loop, right? Now say suppose if I want to print the sum of the first 50 numbers. So how you say? I will first of all initialize a sum variable, int sum is equal to 0, and then out here you give int I is equal to 0, and then I less than equal to 50, I plus plus. Okay, and then over here you simply give sum is equal to sum plus the value of I, and then you print the sum as well. In the end I just say sum is the value of sum. Okay, so now when I run my code, so you see that it says that the sum of the first 50 numbers is 1275. Now how did this logic work? How did this happen? We can debug the program, we can debug this program as well to understand this. Alright, so say I put a breakpoint over here, and then now if I click on the start button, so the control comes to the breakpoint. I hit F11 from the keyboard. So initially the value of I is equal to 0 and sum is also 0, and then it checks the condition 0 less than equal to 50 true. It will go inside the for loop, and then it says sum is equal to sum plus I, that is 0 plus 0. The value of sum will be 0, right? You see the value of sum is 0. Okay, and then it again checks, like it will again increment the value of I by 1, that is I will be equal to 1 less than equal to 50, the condition is true. It will go inside the for loop, right? So you see that the value of I is 1 now, and then again it will check, it will give the value of sum as 0 plus 1 equal to 1, right? So you see that the value of sum has been changed to 1 now. Okay, then again the value of I is incremented by 1, so now the value of I has been changed to 2. 2 is less than equal to 50 true, goes inside the for loop. Okay, and then it prints the value of sum, that is sum is equal to, now it will be, initially the value of sum was 1, so 1 plus 2 is equal to 3, so there it comes sum is equal to 3, right? So it will like this it will keep on running the for loop and will print the value of a sum in the end of the first 50 numbers. Alright. Okay, so practical example on the for loop, that is how can we use this for loop with Selenium, that is where will we be actually using this loop in Selenium. Now say suppose you have an Excel file with you which contains this data, username, password, email and the zip code we have. Okay, we have this data with us. Now we have as you can see, we have the data on each and every row. We have the data in each and every row. Right, now while executing this stuff with Selenium, we will soon be reading the Excel file with C# as well to write your data driven scripts in Selenium. So to write the data driven scripts using a for loop with the help of Selenium, that is we will have to iterate through the row number and the column number. So using the for loop, we will be iterating through the entire Excel sheet which is containing your data. So this is the major usage of the for loop in Selenium while learning with C#. Okay, so going forward, let us now see what arrays are. What is the practical advantage of the arrays, how arrays are used, and what are arrays. Okay, and then we'll also see the practical usage of the arrays in Selenium as well. Alright, so let's add a new class, arrays, and I will add a main function to it. Okay, now what is an array? Now suppose I have a lot of data with me. I have this Excel file with me which contains 4 fields: username, password, email and the zip code, right? So we can make the variables out here. That will be, say, username is equal to something, then we have password as well, then we have email variable with us, that is something @gmail.com, right? And then we have the zip code, that is any zip code you have. Okay, now sometimes you will have a lot of data. This is just the little bit of data that we are discussing right now. This will be very confusing because suppose you've got 100 fields of data on a web page and you need to fill the values in those 100 text boxes using the Selenium. So what exactly will you do? So out there we will be using the concept of the arrays. So array is basically a memory location in which you can store multiple values. For example, how arrays look like. We have this as an array will look something like this. That is, you will have your data inside the array like this. Okay, so each box you can say is a house, and you recognize your house by its house number. That is, this is at the 0th index, then 1, 2, 3 and 4. So you will be keeping your data inside every section of your array. Here will we be putting our data, right? So each section can store something, and each section has got an index associated with it, similar to the way like every house has a house number. Alright, so now we can make the string array. That is how you declare your string array. String is equal to, you declare the string array of type string, and then you specify the size of your array. So this number, it specifies the size of the array. That is, this array has got 5 values inside it. Okay, first value is at the 0th index, then the second value is at the 1, third value is at the second index and so on. Okay, right. So we can simply say that string 0 is holding the value this. Similarly, string 1, that is the value at the first index, what it is holding, it is holding the value this, right? And then similarly we have string at the second index is something at the rate gmail.com, that is your email ID, and you have your zip code, that is any value you have. Okay, and say suppose I have a city variable as well with me. Okay, so say it is New Delhi. Okay, right. So this is how you declare the array. Now there is the drawback of the array as well. That is, if the array is of the type string, then you can then you have to give the maximum capacity of the string array. And then if the array is of the type integer, you declare an integer array. Okay, and then you give the size of the array. Okay, hold on. And then you give the size of an array. Okay, so this you have to give the number. So that means the number of integer this integer array can hold. This number signifies that in the case of the integer array. Okay, and then string array cannot hold the integer values inside it, and integer array cannot hold the string values inside it. Similarly, if you have a character array, then character array cannot hold the integer or the string values inside it. So arrays is for a particular data type. You cannot store cross data types inside one single array. So there is a solution for that as well. We'll tell you in some time. So one of the major drawback is the size of an array. Sometimes you don't know what amount of data will we be actually reading from the script. So in that case, the size will create a problem. Alright, so now some features of the array, that is if you want to find the length of an array. If you want to find the length of an array using coding, then what you say, you simply say string dot length. You simply fire the length property and it will give you the length. Okay, say if you print the length, okay, and I'll write console.read key in order to read the output. Okay, and then now if I execute my code, So you see that it says that the length of the string array is 5, right? The length of the string array 5. Similarly, we can even print the length of the integer array as well. That is, you say console.writeLine I.length. And then now if you execute your code, it says that the length of the integer array is 10. Okay, now if suppose you want to print all the elements of the string array which you have declared over here, then for that you can simply write a for loop, that is for int x is equal to 0, x less than the total number of elements you have, that is string dot length x plus plus. Okay, now why am I starting with 0? It is because the first value is at the 0th index. Okay, right, and then you can simply print all the values, that is string at the x position you want to print. Right, and then now if I execute, you see that it prints all the values of the string array, all the 5 values of the string array. So when you run it for the first time, x will be equal to 0, so string 0 will be printed, that is xxx. And then when you run it for the second time, string 1 will be executed, which has this value, right, and so on. So when you run it completely, it prints the whole array. Similarly, with the integer array as well, we can do the same stuff. That is, if you declare your integer array as well, that is I0 is holding any values, say 10. Similarly, we have we have 10 values, 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 9 and 10. Okay, so I0 will be having this, and this value. Alright, so in order to print the integer array, in the same way we'll write a for loop for int y is equal to 0, y less than the length of the array I dot length. Okay, and then you have y plus plus, and you print your integer array, that is I at the yth position. And then when I execute it, you see that it prints all the values of the integer array, and then last value is the length of the integer array, that is 10. Now we are printing the length of the integer array as well. So if you want to print the integer array in the reverse order, that is the last index should be printed first. So then we'll have to start the value of the y with length of array minus 1, because the last index will be length minus 1, because the indexes are starting from the 0th index, right? So you will say y is equal to I dot length minus 1, and the condition will be y greater than equal to 0, and then you say y minus minus, right? And then now if you execute it again, you see that it prints the result in the reverse order. Alright, so now we'll see the two-dimensional array. Now in Selenium we will be using the two-dimensional array only. Two-dimensional array, how it looks something like this, that is we have the data in the rows and columns format. In the two-dimensional array, you have your data in the two-dimensional format, that is in the form of the rows and columns. So rows and columns will be there in the two-dimensional array, and inside each and every cell we will have the data. Okay, we will have the data inside each and every cell, and the row number starts with the 0th index 1, 2 and 3, and similarly the columns also start with the 0, 1, 2, 3 and 4 and so on. Right, so this is how the two-dimensional array looks like. Now to make a two-dimensional array, what you need to do is that we will first of all add a new class, and I'll add a main function to it. Okay, and then how you declare your two-dimensional array, that is we have this new string, and then you specify the size of your array. Okay, so the first number holds, like, it specifies the number of rows, and the second number, it specifies the number of columns that you will be having in your two-dimensional array. Okay, right, okay, sorry, it should be like this. Right, so this is your two-dimensional array with 4 rows and 5 columns inside it. And then we'll initialize the values inside the two-dimensional array as well. That is how you initialize your values inside the two-dimensional array. Let us say, suppose, write the data for the first row. Okay, so first row will be A at the 0th value, 0th row, like the first row will be at the 0th index, and then we have to write the data for the first row, that is first is the row number and then is your column number. So the column number is a 0, right? And then say, suppose you initialize the values. Similarly, we initialize the data for the first row and for the second column, that will be at the first index, right? So this will be your data for the first row, second column. Similarly, we have the data for the first row, third column is equal to C you have. Then similarly we have it for 0th row, that is the first row, and the fourth column, that will be equal to D. Okay, and similarly we have it for the fifth column as well, that is 0 comma 4, having the fourth index, and you initialize the variable. So this will be your complete data for the first row. This will tell you, like how the arrays are declared, two-dimensional arrays are declared. These are declared like this. First we put the values inside the array, and then similarly we can even put the, like, we will put the values for the second row as well, second row, which will be at the first index, right? Like, you just have to change the index at the first index. Okay, and then you have your values. Alright, so how the values are getting stored inside the memory, that is, we have this as the array, that is what we have. We have 5 columns with us, and we have 4 rows. Right, so this is at the 0th index 1, 2 and 3, and similarly we have the columns also starting with the 0th index 3 and 4. Right, so the first cell 0 comma 0, that is first row, first column, what it will be having, this will be having the data as A. Similarly, for the first row, first column will be having the data as B. Then similarly we are having C, D and E. So this is how the values are stored inside the two-dimensional array, right? And similarly we will store the value for the third row as well. You have your data for the third row, so third row will be at the second index. Alright, and you keep your data inside it. Oh, Okay, and similarly we'll also keep the data for the fourth row also. That will be at the third index. Okay, right. And then now why do we use these two-dimensional arrays in Selenium? I have showed you this Excel file previously, that we have this Excel file with us, and then when we read this Excel file in Selenium, we read it actually inside the two-dimensional array only, because you see that the data is actually represented in the rows and columns format. Right, so we don't read the Excel file cell by cell. We put the whole data inside the two-dimensional array, and then we will be reading the data using the Selenium script. Now how to print this two-dimensional array? Then for that I need to write a for loop. That is, we'll simply write a for loop for int. Now first of all, before writing the for loop, we will have to print number of rows and the number of columns that are there inside this two-dimensional array. Right, so how will you print the number of rows? That is, we print the number of rows as, you say, total number of rows are a dot get the length. So get length is a function, right? And then you specify the dimension. That is, as I told you in the beginning, that the first number is specifying it signifies the rows, and the second number signifies the columns, the number of columns you have. So the first number is at the 0th index, right? So we want to get the length of the number, like we want to get the value of the number of rows that we have. So that is at the 0th index. Alright, so now when I print, if I run it, I'll also write console.read key, and I will just comment this main function. Hold on. And I run it. Okay, so you see that it says total number of rows are 4. The same output, we have 4 rows with us, right? Similarly, to print the number of columns, now how many columns you have, that is, you say columns are a dot get the length at the first index. That will signify the number of columns that you have. That is, number of columns are 5. Similar, like same, we have the number of columns as 5 with us. Right, so now we need to print each and every row inside this two-dimensional array. So what we do, we will write a for loop for int row number is equal to 0, row number less than the total number of rows you have. That is, total number of rows is getting by this function, then row number plus plus. Okay, so why row number is equal to 0? It is because I want to start from the first row, and first row is at the 0th index. Right, then again, now what this for loop will do, this for loop will iterate over each and every row. It will iterate over each and every row. Now inside this for loop, we will write another for loop which will iterate over all the columns that you have inside the two-dimensional array. Right, so similarly we'll write another for loop for iterating over all the columns. That is, column number is equal to 0, column number less than the total number of columns that you have, then column number plus plus. Okay, and then we will print the data, that is row num and the column num. Alright, so now when I run it, so now you see that it prints the entire data for the two-dimensional array. It prints the complete two-dimensional array. So you have iterated through the complete two-dimensional array. right. Let's make it more clear. What I'll do is that, okay, and rather I'll print the one row data in one single line only, right? And then after that, oh, just a minute. Yes, right. So now you see that it prints the data for all the four rows that you have in your Excel, like in your data that you have specified. Right. So console dot write line, it will move the cursor to the new line. So I have just written console dot write line. So we have seen practically the, like we have seen how two dimensional arrays are declared, and then we have also seen the single dimensional array as well. Now most of the time you will be using the two dimensional array only while dealing with the test data. The only drawback of the arrays is that it cannot be determined in the beginning what would be the length of the array. What should be the length of the array be there. Okay, so this is all about the two-dimensional array. Now one more thing which is left with the two-dimensional array is that in a string array, if I want to put the integer values, then you cannot put that. If in a string array I want to put the integer values, then you cannot put. If I make the integer array and if I want to put the string values in that array, then you cannot do that as well. So I need to have an array in which I can put multiple types of data, because in my test cases I can have, like in your test data over here you see that we have the data of string type and we have the data of the integer type as well, which, like, right, we have the integer type data as well. So you can have the string values as well as the numeric values over there in your Excel file. So I might have the different kind of test data. So for that what we do, we make something like an object array, right? We make something like an object array that we will be actually using in Selenium as well. So how you declare an object array, that is, for that we have an object, say array it is, okay, and you say of the type object, and then you specify the size of your array. Okay, now what is an object? Hold on. Oh, it has to be something like this. Yes. Okay. Now, what is an object? Object is an inbuilt class inside C Sharp, which we'll talk about this class in detail as we move on with the course. Just for the time being, just keep in mind that with this object array you can store multiple types of data inside this object array. Okay, right. So the advantage of this object array is that we can store multiple data types inside it. That is, if you say you can store the string values inside it, then similarly you can even store the integer numbers over here as well, right? Similarly, if you want to store the boolean values, that also you can store inside this object array, inside this two-dimensional object array. And even the float values also you can even store it over here, that is say suppose 2.8. okay, so this object array can store multiple data types inside it. It can store any value inside this object array. So this is all about the arrays: two-dimensional array, single dimensional array, and the object array. The object array which we will be actually using in Selenium. Alright, so now let's move forward to what functions are. So for that I'll add a new class. that is functions, and I'll add a main function to it. Okay, functions are very important. Function, what is a function? It is an independent small unit of the execution. Now main is a function out here. Right, main is a function out here. It is starting from the curly braces. Then you have your scope of the main function. You write all your code which has to come inside this main function, and then you close your main function, the closing brackets. Similarly, we can make our own functions as well. That is, say suppose if I make a new function that will be, say, public void test. Okay, I make one more function. Now what is this static, what is this void, what is this public and all will get clear to you as we proceed with the course. Okay, now this test is the name of the function. If I write this test function inside the main function, okay, then you cannot do that. You cannot create one function inside another main function, inside another function. All right, say like out here you can write the you can execute, you can write your code inside the main function. That is, if I write in the main function vr, and similarly out here I write vr in the test function. Okay, right, and then now if I run my code, if I run this code, I will see the output. Okay, if I run this code, you see that it only prints in main. It does not print the in test function. Now why it is so? It is because the functions are not executed as they are, as they look like. They will be executed, but like as they look like they will be executed, they will not be. And functions are inside the class body only. Inside the class body only you declare all your functions, and all functions should be inside the class body only, right? And they should be parallel to each other. You cannot make a function inside another function. If you put, like for example, if I put this test function inside this main function, then you will get an error. When you compile your code, you get an error. You get many errors inside it. Okay, so make sure that the functions are parallel to each other. If you want to print, and then if you want to print this statement as well in the test function, then you will have to call this test function inside the main function. So as we all know that main function is the one in which the control comes by default when the program runs for the first time. So if I write test function, if I call this test function in the main function, if you call this function, okay, and then if you run, okay, so object reference is required for the non-static field. Okay, so I'll just declare it as a static function. Okay, and now if you run it, you see that it even prints the in test function as well. Okay, right, so for the time being, just keep in mind that only the static things can be called in the static function, and then what is this static keyword, we'll just discuss that also. But for the time being, just we will keep this in mind that static things can be accessed by the static variables or everything functions or whatever it is. Right, so we have to, like, in order to print this statement in test, we have to call this test function in the main function, because when the control first time comes to this main function, it will check, it will call this test function, and then it prints the result of the test function, that is in test. Okay, and then you can print this test function any number of time you want to print. Okay, say suppose I want to print it 4 times, then you can print it any number of times. You can call this test function any number of times inside the main function. And then the order in which the execution is the program executes is the serial order in the main function. In the main function, first of all, like we are calling the test function, so it will call all the result of the test function, and then it will print the next output, that is in main. Alright, okay, and then you can create any number of functions as well in your single class, and then we'll just have to call that function inside the main function. Okay, now say suppose I declare one more main function, public static void say display. Okay, and out here say I print anything over here, right? And then now if I call this display function, all right, and then if you run your code, you see that it prints hello in the end because we are calling this display function in the end. So the execution of the program is in the serial order. In the way you call your functions, in the same way we will get the output from the main function. Okay, so this is very useful thing. This is how the functions work in the concepts. Function is something which can execute itself again and again. Now suppose you've got 50 test cases, or you've got 1,000 test cases, and all of them require you to log in inside your application. So instead of writing the whole code which will log you in inside your application, you can write the code inside a single function and then call that function again and again from the main function. So you can write the code inside your single function and then call that function 100 times inside your main function for all the 100 test cases or for all the 50 test cases. So I'm just giving you an example over here that how we do it practically. We'll see when we'll do with the Selenium part. Okay, and then we can even pass the values inside the functions as well. For example, let's add a new class for it. That is, say I have a class functions underscore passed by values. Okay, now say suppose over here inside this class I want to make a function. I have a function, say it is public void sum all. Okay, and inside this I want to, like, I pass the three numbers int a, int b and int c. Okay, so this sum all function is taking three parameters inside it, a, b and c. Okay, right, and then what you want to do, you want to print the sum of all these numbers. That is, you say int sum is equal to a plus b plus c. Okay, right, and then what you do, you will simply call this function. You want to print, like you want to extract the output of this function, you simply call this function in the main function. Alright, you simply call this function in the main function, and rather I'll declare it as a static function. Okay, and then when I call this function, that is sum all, okay, I'll have to make it as a public class. Okay, and then inside this I will call this okay, hold on. So it is inside the class we have this sum all function, right? What am I doing? I want to print the result, and then like in the sum this function I will first of all print the sum. Okay, and then similarly, like I have to call this say we pass the parameters, the three numbers whose sum we want. Okay, and it says does not exist. Hold on. Oh, what am I doing? Okay, I'm just calling this sum all function from some another class, that is the functions class. Okay, sorry for that. I'll create a main function inside this class only, a main function. Okay, and inside from this main function we will call the sum all function. So you see that you call this sum all function, and then inside it you need to pass the three parameters, the three numbers whose sum you want to print, right? So suppose I pass in the three numbers. Okay, and then now if you run your code, I'll just comment this code of the, okay, I will just comment the main function only. Okay, and then now I execute it. Okay, so you see that it prints the sum of the numbers 2, 5 and 2, that is a 9. Similarly, you can call this sum all function any number of times in the main function. That is, say if I call it again for some another set of data, right, and then now if I run it again, it prints the data for the next sum all function, and you can call it any number of times. So function is like a factory in which you supply something and the output comes up on the screen according to the logic which you have applied in your function. Okay, so functions can be called any number of times. There can be any function, and then there can be any function in a class. Functions have to be parallel to each other. Then one more point, functions have to be parallel to each other, and the number of arguments you specify in the function have to be same with the number of arguments you passed in your main function. You passed from the main function. I cannot pass a string value inside this when we are calling this function in the main function, the sum all function. Then you cannot pass a string value, since all the parameters are the integer values only. Then you cannot pass a string value inside the main function. You will get an error. Okay, because what am I saying? I am saying that this function takes in the integer values only inside it, and then if you try to call the string type variable, then you will get an error. So we'll have to make another function sum all, but in a different way. Then you can allow the string values to be entered into it. Alright. Okay, say suppose I create one more function, say sum all it is, and inside this function say I have the string value with me, say int a, it is int b, and that is inside this sum all function I have one string value and two integer values with me. Okay, so now when you call the function in the main function as sum all, and then you call in any value, you give any string value, and then you give the integer value and another integer value. Okay, so now this time this sum all is this function which accepts a string value and two integer values. Right, although the names are same for both the functions, but the parameters are different in both the functions. Alright, and then now if you we have two sum all functions, one having the three integer values and the another one having a string value and two integer values inside it. Alright, and then now then one more thing. Now if I say suppose declare a variable inside the a sum all function. Say suppose if I declare a variable inside the sum all function, then this variable is a local variable. It is a local variable. It means that the life of this variable is only inside this function only. Right? Okay. Right. So this is your local variable. And then same, like say suppose if you try to access this t variable from this sum all function, say suppose if you want to print the value of t inside this sum all function, then you will get an error as it says the name t does not exist in the current context. It is because the life of the t variable is only inside this sum all function only. You cannot call this function, you cannot call this variable inside another function. This is not possible. Okay, so if we declare a function inside the main function, say we have out here, say suppose out here inside the main function, if I declare a function over here, say string c is equal to anything you write, say hello over here. Okay, then this c variable will be accessed inside the main function only. Inside the main function only, this c variable will be accessed. So local variables can only be called inside the function in which they are declared. Alright, so this is again one more function, and then a function can also return back a variable or a value also. For example, I have this sum all function. I have two sum all functions with me. Okay, and I want to check whether the result is greater than say whether the result is greater than 100 or not. If I have this sum all function in which I am printing the sum of the three numbers, I want to check whether the sum is greater than 100 or not. And if it is greater than 100, then I want to print the greater value, else it should say that the value is less than 100. It should print then. Okay, right. So you see that, and so you see that this void is a return type. Void is actually a return type. Void means that it cannot return anything. Void means null. So a function can accept any number of arguments, but a function can return only one value if a function want to return. For example, I want the sum that we are getting, that we are extracting, that we are printing. I want the sum to be accessed inside the main function. Now when I call this sum all function inside the main function, I want that when the function should send me back the sum of all the three numbers, so that it can check whether the sum is greater than 100 or not. So in that case, we will change the return type of this sum function, which is void. Since void means nothing, I will change the return type of this function to an integer data type. That is, this function will now return you an integer value, and it's mandatory to write the return statement as well in the function in which you have your return type. That is, you will say return the sum, which is also of the type integer. So now you see that the error has gone. Alright, and then in the main function we will get the result in an integer value, since this sum all function is now returning you an integer value. Alright, and then now you can print the value of the s. And then we can check that if s is greater than 100, if s is greater than 100, then simply print greater than 100 it is, that is the value of the sum, right? Else if the sum is less than 100, then it should print less than 100, whatever it is, right? And then now if I run it, So now you see that since the result was a 9, so 9 is less than 100, so it says that the result is less than 100, which is a 9. Alright, so this is how you make your function. This is what the functions are. Okay, and then similarly we can even make another function inside this class. Say suppose I have one more function, public static void, to find the sum of the numbers. To find the sum of the number, say suppose I want to find the sum of the numbers, so I make a function find sum, right? So whatever number you send in over here inside this find sum function, it will find the sum from from that number till that number you will returning be that. Okay, and then it should return the result as well. That is, it should return me back. So I will change the return type of this function to an integer type. Okay, and then out here I say suppose int sum is equal to 0, and then say I want to print the sum from 1 up till this number, right? So that is for, and then I'll write a for loop for int x is equal to 0, x less than equal to the number that you send in, and x plus plus. Okay, and then you say sum is equal to sum plus x, and then you return the sum as well. Alright, and then inside your main function you simply call this find sum function. Say suppose I want to find the sum of first 50 numbers. Okay, I want to find the sum of the first 50 numbers, and I'll store it in an integer variable. Okay, right, and then you print the result. You say sum of 50 numbers is the value of x. Okay, and I'll just comment this part, and then now if I execute it, you see that it says the sum of the 50 numbers is 1275. Similarly, if you want to print the sum of say 100 numbers, say x is equal to find the sum of the 100 numbers. Okay, and then if you print, you say the sum of the 100 numbers is 50. Alright, so it's like a function, that is like you can simply say that a function is like a factory. We send something inside it and we get the output according to the logic that you send in the function. Alright, so this is all about the function, and then we'll tell you like in the practical usage of the functions in Selenium is, for example, in Selenium, say suppose we will make a function known as say if I have a function to log in inside my application. So I'll simply make a login function inside my Selenium script, right? And inside this login function I will be sending the username and the password of the person who want to log in inside the application, right? So out here we will be writing the Selenium script to log in inside the application, and then if the login is successful, then it should return you true, or if it is not successful, then it will return you the result as a false. So in order to that we will change the return type of this function to boolean. Alright, so this function, this login function will be capable of logging a user inside the application, and then it will give you the result accordingly. Okay, so this is how the functions are declared and they are used in Selenium as well.